Hi guys, so today we're going to go over a little more on right triangle trigonometry. So let's say for instance you're given a trig function, cosine equals negative 2 over 3. It's not from the unit circle, and they give you a condition as well, and they ask you to find another trig function. So given these values, I'm just going to draw out the four quadrants and the acronym, all students take calculus. So remember the acronym All Students Take Calculus is just telling you what's positive in which quadrant. So in this case, this would be all, this would be only sine is positive, only tangent is positive in quadrant 3, and only cosine is positive in quadrant 4. So given this value, cosine equals negative 2 over 3, we're not going to be in quadrant 1 because all is positive there and cosine is negative. Cosine could be cosine could be negative in quadrant 2 as well as in quadrant 3, but not in quadrant 4. So we either have a right triangle in quadrant 2 or 3. So that's where the condition comes in. So cosine is negative, which leads us to either quadrant 2 or 3, but tangent is positive. Greater than 0 means that it's positive. So that means we're not going to be in quadrant 2. Tangent is only positive and cosine is only negative in quadrant 3. So this is the only quadrant that meets both conditions. We always draw a right triangle that sits on the x-axis, and the angle is right by the origin. From here, we're going to use SOHCAHTOA. So remember using SOHCAHTOA, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Adjacent is the side that the angle sits on, and the hypotenuse is here. Remember, there's a negative, which makes sense because I am on the negative x-axis, so this would be negative. So from here, I'm going to use my right triangle trigonometry Pythagorean theorem to solve for the opposite side first. And then from there, I'll have all three sides, and you can find any trig function you want after that. So using a squared plus b squared equals c squared, I'm going to put negative 2 squared plus b squared equals it's not c squared, sorry, 3 squared. And from here, anytime you square negative, it'll give you positive. So positive 4 plus b squared equals 9. We're going to subtract 4 on both sides. And I will get b squared equals 5. To get rid of the square, I'm going to square root both sides. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to write over the square, but they do get rid of each other. So when you square root a number, remember that it could be positive or negative square root of 5. However, we're dealing with a length here, the length of this line or the height of the triangle. So we're going to leave it as positive. But also keep in mind, when I write this as square root of 5, I am on the negative x-axis. So you could either write this as a negative ahead of time, if you remember, or once you get the trig functions that they're asking for, just to remember you're in quadrant 3 and only tangent and its reciprocal cotangent is positive there. So anytime a trig function is positive, its reciprocal carries the same sign. Same thing with if it's negative, reciprocal has the same sign. So you could either write the negative ahead of time if you remember it, or you could just do it afterwards, remembering that only tangent and cotangent is positive in quadrant 3. So in this case, they're asking for the sine value. Once I have all three three sides of the triangle, I could find any trig function that I want. So in this case, sine of theta equals opposite over hypotenuse. So opposite is negative square root of 5 over hypotenuse, which is 3. And that makes sense because I am in quadrant 3 where only tangent and cotangent are positive, sine is negative. You could actually find any trig function that they ask for once you have all three sides. So for instance, if I wanted sine's reciprocal, which is cosecant, I would just flip this fraction, giving me negative 3 over square root of 5. You could rationalize the denominator, but since you're working with multiple choice, it would depend. Let's say they're asking for tangent. And I'm just going, outside the question, just looking for all the trig functions at this point. So, in case there's any questions on how to do it, you know how. So tangent equals opposite over adjacent. So let's say tangent is here. Tangent equals the opposite of the angle is negative square root of 5 over the adjacent is the side the angle sits on, negative square root of 2. Two negatives make a positive, so that's square root of 5 over 2, which makes sense because in quadrant 3 tangent should be positive. If I flip the fraction, I'll get its reciprocal cotangent, which is 2 over square root of 5, which again you can rationalize depending on what the multiple choice answers are. And then finally, they gave you cosine, which was negative. I'm going to write it down here. They gave you cosine, which was negative 2 over 3. So when you're given a trig function value, you automatically know its reciprocal, which is going to be negative 3 over 2. All right, so in this case, I know we were only supposed to find sine, but we found all 6 trig functions. So either way, I hope this helps.